Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well today. Today's video is just going to be me simply rambling over some footage in the background. So, something that I've thought about for a while and was recently reminded of is the issues with the Electro type and how it could possibly be fixed, because as most people know, Electro is probably the weakest element in the game as of this point. As long as we're not talking about Dendro, Dendro rise up, But yeah, I have an idea. Maybe I'll spitball some more while I'm on here, but I had a pretty good idea that would be special to Electro, and I mean, it could be overpowered. I seriously do not believe it will be, because the thing is that if you're not up to speed, Electro, Swirl, and I think technically Crystallize too, I don't think it fits into this category, is considered a transformative reaction, and then Melt and Vaporize is considered an amplifying reaction. And so what makes Vaporize and Melt so good is that it doesn't matter how much elemental mastery you have. If you hit really hard even with no elemental mastery, you'll get a 50% or 100% damage boost. It just really depends on which order the reaction took place, and there you go. You get a huge amount of damage. But the way that the transformative attacks work is that it's essentially its own stat, its own number when that proc happens. So for Overload, when you proc Overload, there'll be the hit from the Electro character, the hit from the Pyro character, but the Pyro, there will be a second hit of Pyro that will have actually been the Overload. And that's the same for Swirl and all three of the Electro reactions. Superconduct is a little weird. I don't know if it actually does a actual damage, but it does have sort of an explosion type effect. So there's a couple issues with Electro, and the first one is that there's not a consistent applier of Electro other than like C6 Fischl. And when I say consistent applier, I'm specifically referring to the never-ending pain that we don't have more characters like Xingqiu in the game. Xingqiu is very unique because not only is it that he's able to apply Hydro when he auto-attacks, but he's able to get around internal cooldown, allowing him to apply Hydro at a ridiculous rate. Internal cooldown essentially keeps an element from applying too many times, and the ways to get around it is you wait out the timer, which is somewhere above 2 seconds or something. I am not certain. I'm not looking at something right now. Or you hit the opponent 3 times with the same move, and then it'll ignore the rest of the timer. And a funny little thing about Xingqiu is because he has like 5 swords hitting the opponent at once with an auto attack, it gets around the internal cooldown per hit because there's so many rain swords hitting them that it ignores the timer. So what this means is a character like Diluc, Hu Tao, Klee, essentially every single character in the game that wants to auto attack is going to be doing way more damage, especially if they're a Pyro character, because they're going to be proccing a bunch of Vaporize. And so there are some very good appliers of Electro. Fischl and Beidou make up the synergy for Fireworks comp, but there is still an underlying issue. Technically both of them have internal cooldown still, but that's not like the biggest issue. The other big thing that I wanted to go over is that the damage on the Electro reactions can be fine. The issue is that there are only 3 aspects that determine the damage of an Electro or Anemo-based reaction. Your level, the level of your character, the amount of elemental mastery you have, and the amount of resistance the hit target has to it. So what this means is that if you're trying to do some sort of team that has powerful electrocharge overload reactions, it means that you have to have essentially every character have high elemental mastery, because something that happens quite frequently on a fireworks comp is that the person that is proccing the Electro charge can switch between Beto, Fischl, or your Hydro main DPS. It does not matter which one is proccing it. Well, excuse me, it does matter. And the reason is that if, say, you have, for example, 400 elemental mastery on your Beto, and then you have 40 on your Fischl and 40 on the Hydro character, essentially you're left with only a small chance that you're going to hit a really nice Electro charge number. And so that's where the biggest issue for Electro lies. For Overload specifically, Overload does nice damage, but there's no abusers of Overload, debatably, other than Yanfei. Overload's tough because it on one hand is really strong and on the other hand is really weak, because its whole gimmick is that it is an explosion that launches things. So for big characters, so a Mida Lawachurl, or say like a Geovashop, you know, it'll do a lot of poise damage, and it'll make it much easier to stun them. So it's really good against big targets. I mean, the more time you keep them in hit stun, which Overload does phenomenally, the less they're going to be hitting you. The issue is when you're fighting a whole bunch of enemies. In that case, they're constantly getting blown back from where you are, and you're not able to keep up a consistent amount of DPS because you're constantly having to sprint to chase them back down as they're falling. And with specific character interactions with Overload, it can be really annoying because they will be flown through the air, and then right as you run up to them, they proc another Overload, and then they're even farther in the air, so you can't even do anything against them. I like Overload a lot, but the thing is that it is very niche how it is now. And Yanfei takes good advantage of Overload, but that's one character out of, what, 40? Like, there's not really many good characters that take good advantage of Overload, whether it be on big characters or small characters. So, all of that to say, there's one other thing I'm trying to think of, it'll come to me in a minute, is the damage on Electrocharge and Overload, of course by nature, is not going to be as high as Melt and Vaporize, but that does not mean that it's bad damage. What's nice about it is that it is a consistent flat line of damage, so even if you are attacking with an auto attack, and your auto attack wouldn't be very good for a Melt or Vaporize reaction since it's going to be lower damage than some big burst damage, you can still hit that flat Overload damage or Electrocharge damage and it'll be really nice. So the proposal I have to fix Electro is, I think it would be really interesting if Electro accounted for both the elemental mastery of both characters in its proc. So if you apply Hydro with Xingqiu and then swirl it with Sucrose, I would like... That's not an Electro character, give me one sec. If you do Xingqiu and Beto, it would apply both of their elemental mastery to the equation. So I suppose that sounds pretty preposterous when you hear it, like, oh my god, that'd be overpowered. But the thing is that even with, like, maxed out elemental mastery, an Overload reaction's probably going to do around 25,000. That's good damage, but I mean, you can hit higher numbers on Melt and Vaporize. And because there's not too many good abusers of Overload, and it's just very inconsistent with Electrocharge, because while yes, it does do a lot of good damage, it isn't consistent, because it's all based on who has the highest elemental mastery and how often are they getting to proc that effect. So, another huge issue with Electro that this would be solving is that there seems to be this requirement that all of your characters are built with elemental mastery when you're doing a more Electro reaction based team. And that's why it's such a difficult thing, and you're typically just resorting to big damage. It's what holds Electro characters back, despite Fireworks comp being so good, very often they do not build much elemental mastery because there's no way you can guarantee that that amount of elemental mastery you invested is actually being used properly. A character like Xiangling can get around this issue because her Pyronado has no internal cooldown. So if you're able to apply Hydro with, say, Child or Xingqiu before the Pyronado hits the opponent, it can guarantee to be the Pyronado that causes the Vaporize, meaning that it's guaranteed to be what does the big elemental mastery hit. Electro doesn't have that. And another thing is, too, is Electro is severely bottlenecked by the sheer power of a character like Fischl. And it really makes me wonder, like, how strong Ball will be able to be. Because if she... I was listening to Tenten say this, and I agree. Like, if Ball was a type like Pyro or Cryo or even Hydro, like, I mean, there's not too many Hydro characters, so maybe I'm not quite there on that one. But if she was like one of the big attacking types, like, she would be so stupidly strong. Just based on what we already know. So Electro characters are bottlenecked into a specific design where if they are essentially... they have to be stronger than the design of a lot of characters, or else they don't find safe waters to swim in. They don't have good team comps to be put in. Fischl is borderline broken. That's why she works. I still don't use her because I find her boring, but, you know, that's besides the point. Like, Keqing, for how cool she is, she's a really dope character. She doesn't do too well in terms of, like, DPS in comparison to other characters. Yes, I'm aware you can just slap on good artifacts. Everything can slap on good artifacts. But when you consider the mathematics behind the elemental reactions, it doesn't boil to being, like, as good as some of her Pyro competitors. So, yeah, that's the change I would propose. I would like to see it to where Electro, the elemental mastery proc, is shared between the two characters that cause the reaction. And this would make it to where you do not need to build as much elemental mastery, excuse me. It means that Electro will be able to do consistently more damage, and it also means that a comp like Fireworks will be way more consistent, and it'll be able to flourish even more than it already does. And I think it would also give Electro a good foothold in terms of competitive... what am I saying? Competitive. In terms of being more viable. Because Electro just can't stack up as it is currently. And I feel like a change like this would, like, do a lot of wonders. It would take testing. But I think that could work really well. Because, like, going on sort of in the similar direction as that Xiangling example, the reason that the Electro buff a couple patches ago was actually an Anemo buff is because Anemo by design is forced to be the proccing element. And so when you are guaranteed for the Anemo character to be the one that's causing swirl, you can put elemental mastery on the Anemo character, and guess what? You're gonna get beautiful amounts of damage. But Electro does not have that luxury. And what I would hate to see is that Electro is forced into a situation where it needs a Xingqiu, you know? Like, I would hate to see a lot of characters get pushed by the wayside when Electro Xingqiu comes out or something like that, you know? Someone that's just able to apply it with no internal cooldown and quickly and stuff like that. Like, I think that would just be uninteresting. So I think it would give a lot of breathing room for Electro characters and comps that want Electro if it shared the elemental mastery. So I think that'll do it for me today. I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day. Leave in the comments what you think or any other changes you might have, and maybe I'll make a follow-up if people have some good ideas. Alright, have a nice one.